to the Evangelist Nick Garrett channel. Today I want to talk to you about a special character in early church history named Ignatius of Antioch. It is said that before his death, Peter had actually hand-selected Ignatius, that after his immediate successor, Evodius, that Ignatius would take over and rule as Bishop of Antioch. Well, this is impossible to verify, but we do know many fascinating things about Ignatius. And the reason I chose to cover him and not other individuals such as Polycarp or Papias, even though they all make up a unique period of time where we're transitioning from the actual apostles into the church fathers, meaning these men were either students of the apostles or students of the apostles' students. Well, Ignatius does something very important and very unique that I want to share with you. Ignatius was born in the province of Syria in what was the Roman Empire at the time, and while his date of death is not precisely known, he died according to Eusebius in the year 108 AD. But Purvo suggests he died from 135 to 140. That's agreed upon by another historian, Barnes, that he died in Rome. It is known that he died as a martyr. Now, what's interesting is he was primarily known as a writer, and his correspondence formed the main authority of what became the writings of the Apostolic Fathers. He's considered one of the three most important, along with Clement of Rome and Polycarp. In his letters, we also find for the first time Christian theology. We find ecclesiology in his work, the sacraments, and the role of the bishops. Now, if you haven't read the letters that he wrote to the various churches, such as Ephesus, Rome, and many others, it does stand out as odd how much he emphasizes you gotta listen to your bishops, you gotta listen to your bishops, you gotta listen to your bishops. And he gives us the example of a biblical character named Onesimus. We can read about him in the book of Titus. But it is very interesting, and it makes you wonder, were some of these later revisions when they really wanted people to believe that the church in Rome had its stuff together? Well, while it's natural to want to think skeptically and conspiratorially in these ways, there's no proof of that at all. It just seems that one thing that Ignatius had picked up on, and this is a fact, is that for the church to survive and grow and thrive, they would have to adopt the model that the Roman hierarchical government was using of metropolitan, regional, local, and bishops in charge, and people had to listen to the bishops, and the bishops would say what they would and wouldn't do, and this was a way that Ignatius felt they could stem the flow of all the heresies coming down the pike in reference to Christianity. Not much is known about his life early, apart from what may be inferred from his letters. There are some spurious traditions. One that said Ignatius converted to Christianity when he was young, and that tradition identifies him as a friend of Polycarp, who was the student of John the Apostle. Later in life, Ignatius was chosen to serve as the Bishop of Antioch. The 4th century church historian Eusebius of Nicomedia writes that Ignatius succeeded Evodius, as we already said. Eusebius also wrote that Ignatius himself was appointed to the episcopal see at Antioch, and that it was also a church tradition that Ignatius was one of the children that had sat on the knee of Jesus when he said, "Let the little children come to me." There's no way to prove these things, but there are certainly plenty of proofs involved in the work of Ignatius with his letters themselves. Now here is where it gets interesting, and this is why I chose Ignatius to tell you this story. As I mentioned, we're beginning to transition from the apostles to the church fathers. Well, The church fathers considered it an honor if they were able to be martyred for Christ, in the same way the apostles had been. And there were certain circumstances surrounding Ignatius's martyrdom. Normally, the Romans would have come to Antioch and he would have been put to death right there. But there were different circumstances surrounding Ignatius. In Ignatius's letter that he wrote to the Romans, he says that from Syria even unto Rome, I fight with beasts, both by land and sea, both by day and night, bound to 10 leopards. I mean a band of soldiers. He knew he was going to the pits to fight the lions, as it were, as they say. Now, scholars consider Ignatius's transport to Rome unusual, since those persecuted as Christians would have just been punished locally. Now, a scholar, Stephen Davies, has pointed out that no other example exists from the Flavian age of any prisoners except citizens of prisoners of war being brought to Rome for execution. Well, what it did in the case of Ignatius is it gave him a chance to essentially go on tour and announce Christianity as he went toward Rome. His captors were pleasant to him, and they allowed him to stop at cities like Ephesus, and the people came out and talked with him, and he wrote letters to each of these major churches as he went through, all the while talking about how grateful he was that he was going to Rome to be martyred, just like his predecessors had been. Bryant argues that Ignatius was transferred to Rome at the request of the emperor in order to provide entertainment for the masses being killed in the Colosseum. But he insists, contrary to some, that it was a normal practice to transfer condemned criminals from the provinces in order to offer spectacular sport in the Colosseum at Rome. So we have a discrepancy there. The Flavian generation, so like Josephus, what Josephus would report says, hey, this has never happened before. This is kind of unique. And it does seem unique because look at what happened on the road to Rome. He made these stops. He wrote these letters, which were fascinating. However, this Roman scholar is saying, look, this wasn't at all uncommon. They needed people to entertain in the Colosseum. Now, Davies rejected the idea that Ignatius was transported to the Rome for the games at the Colosseum. He reasons that if Ignatius was in some way a donation by the imperial governor of Syria to the games at Rome, a single prisoner seems a rather miserly reason. But one thing that Davies might miss is that Ignatius himself, in the letter he writes to the Ephesians, talks about how the Christian church of Syria is dead, that there's not many of them left, that at that time the church there had really taken a hit. So this might be an example where a Roman secular historian and a Christian historian could put their notes together and maybe find something a little more truthful there. During the journey to Rome, Ignatius and his entourage of soldiers made a lot of stops in Asia Minor, deviating from the more direct route from Antioch to Rome, and scholars generally agree on the following travel itinerary, if you will. Ignatius first traveled from Antioch in the province of Syria to Asia Minor. It's uncertain whether he traveled by sea or land, although in his letters he says he has traveled both by sea and land. We know that at some point he did. He was taken to Smyrna via the route that bypassed the cities of Magnesia, who he also left letters to, Trails, which he left letters to, Ephesus, which he left letters to. Now, by that time, in the early 2nd century, Ephesus was a Christian powerhouse, so it would have made its word around quickly that Ignatius was there and on his way to be martyred. He also likely passed through Philadelphia. Ignatius then traveled to Troas, where he boarded a ship bound for Neapolis in Macedonia. He also wrote letters there. and then passed through the city of Philippi, and after this, some land or sea route to Rome. As we mentioned, somehow during this trip, the Roman soldiers let Ignatius congregate with entire groups of Christians while in chains. And they would come out to see him, and he would preach to them and hand his letters off to them. And this really was a significant event that led into the next generation of Christian history. The date of his martyrdom, due to the fragmentary nature of the documentation of Ignatius, the date of his death is subject to a significant amount of uncertainty. Tradition places it during the reign of Trajan, who was emperor from 98 to 117. But the earliest source for the Trajan date is in the 4th century from the church historian Eusebius, who is regarded by some modern scholars as an unreliable source for chronological information regarding the early church. He had an ideological interest, obviously, being an early church historian. I'm not sure that really makes a difference here, though, because if he was martyred, he was obviously killed on a certain date, and we know what year he would have died. So he was born in the year 50-ish. Let's say he dies in the year 117. He's quite an old man by that point. I don't see how you get some scholars who say he lived to the year 135 or 140. That just doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, Ignatius himself wrote that he would be thrown to the beast, and in the 4th century, Eusebius reports that that tradition came to pass, which was then repeated by Jerome, who took the Vetus Latina and organized the Latin Vulgate, that first set of scripture. John Chrysostom was the first to allude to the Colosseum as the place that Ignatius was martyred. And contemporary scholars are uncertain that these authors had sources other than Ignatius's own writings, but that doesn't mean they weren't there. As you know, we often have footnotes that tell us, where things are coming from. Now, there is a purported eyewitness account to his martyrdom, which could be interesting, named the Martyrdom of Ignatius of medieval date, and it's presented as being an eyewitness account for the Church of Antioch, attributed to Ignatius, his companion Philo of Cilicia, deacon at Tarsus, and Reus Octopus, a Syrian man. Now, although James Ussher, a historian, regarded it as genuine, the authenticity of the account is seriously questioned. If there is any genuine nucleus to the martyrium, it's been so greatly expanded with interpolations that no part is without questions. And that's the point I was trying to make about Ignatius's constant harping about bishops. There is a time after the fall of Rome when the church regains power in what is the more modern West under Charlemagne in the 800s and 900s, where they would definitely want a scenario where, boy, wouldn't it look good if the early church fathers were just saying, listen to your bishops, everybody, listen to your bishops, everybody. But Ignatius was a spectacular figure for a number of reasons. He celebrated going to his death as a Christian. And what's interesting, I've got to recommend that you just Google these and read them. They're very short letters, but in some of these letters you get a sense of what theology they believed then versus the theology that they came to believe just during the 4th century and the 5th century. And it's a fascinating way to look at church history. Plus, we have to remember, we're reading the work of somebody who is going on to their death. And what legacy do they want to leave in place? Christ is God. Christ is the Son. This is real. So in addition to the bishops, there are other themes present in Ignatius's work. One, unity, unity, unity. Unity of the church, unity of Christians. There has to be unity in order for this to work. He really follows Paul in that way. And as you can imagine, just like we have in every generation, beware of the false teachers, right? We always have beware of the false teachers. They're raving mad, they're dumb, they're heretics. You're always going to have that. We can read more about Ignatius and his epistles in chapter 36 of Eusebius's Church History, Book 3. And we might do that in the future, but I'm at least going to leave a link in the video description so that you can check it out. If you'd like to support us, please do. You know the way. PayPal, Cash App, Venmo. Purchase a book we've written from our Just Tell Me the Truth About Christianity series, Amazon.com/author/NicholasGarrett. Check out Teespring as we continue to revamp it. Get a cup and a shirt. We're building EvangelistNickG.com, and that will become the new hub of all of our work. And we want to just encourage you to continue watching the videos. You can join and become a channel member for a relatively inexpensive. You can be a deacon, an archbishop, or a crusader, and at all three levels you get different perks and prizes and different things. And just want to let you all know that I love you all very much. God bless you, and may your work today bear fruit.